Chapter 11 today, and this chapter is pretty short, and there's really just a few main things that you need to take from it. We're going to talk about how schools are governed, influenced, and financed. And so you may sort of know kind of how that works, and we'll talk about it from a national level and then also from a state level. And so let's jump right in. The first thing that you need to understand is the organizational structure of a typical state school system. So we can talk about Mississippi. Obviously, that's where we are. So in Mississippi, we have a state constitution, right? We know that the Constitution allows our government to be broken into three parts. You have the state legislature, you have the governor, and then you have the state courts. And so the legislature is going to be your House of Representatives and your Senate. Governor, obviously, we know who that is. And then the state courts are going to be the ones that can influence the interpretation of that Constitution. Okay? And so all of those three work together to set our legal system in the state. But when we come to education, the legislature has a lot to do with how much money a a state gets for education. In fact, we're going to talk in a few minutes about the how much money each state, or I'm sorry, the nation federally gives towards education, and that may or may not surprise you. But within a state, a lot of the schools are funded by state appropriation, state money. And so you have the State Board of Education. There's an overall board. It's referred to as MDE. It is the Mississippi Department of Education. And there's a board at MDE that basically is in control of what happens in the school systems. For example, currently in our current situation with COVID-19, MDE is constantly sending out emails to K-12 teachers saying, okay, here's what's coming up, here's what we're going to do, here's when we might go back to school, here's, all these different things. And so they're making some decisions that then filter down to the teacher. Below them, you have the state superintendent. And this person has changed over the last couple of years, a couple times. I can't remember who it is now. Each time, this state superintendent has the overarching power to make decisions about education in Mississippi. Now, he has to answer to the state board, but he is the representative for the state when it comes to education. This person is the top person, okay? The top individual. Again, they answer to the board, but they're the top representative. That's why it says here, they are the chief state school officer. Okay, kind of like a CEO of education. And in Mississippi, the Department of Education is really intertwined. So you have the state board, then you have the superintendent, and then you have the actual Department of Education. This is the department that the superintendent is over, and a lot of the emails that teachers are getting now are being sent from the Department of Education under the direction of the superintendent, who's under the direction of the state board. Okay, they're all housed in Jackson together, and so that's why you kind of think about them as a group together, but it's really three separate entities. Excuse me. Now, once you get past the Department of Education, then it breaks into our local school districts. And so you have the local district, for example, in our area. You have a Lee County School District, you have Tupelo City School District, you have Itawamba County School District, you have into Lee County, that's going to include your Morvilles and Saltillos and Shannon, all of those surrounding areas in Lee County, but not in 2+ city limits. In Pontotoc, there's a Pontotoc City, there's a North Pontotoc, there's a South Pontotoc. North and South are under the Pontotoc County umbrella, and so they're actually in the same school district. Pontotoc City is a different school district, and so you have a lot of local districts across our state. And so, in each of those local districts that are overarching representatives of or controlling bodies of those schools, you have a local superintendent. And so, that superintendent is often the one that will make decisions about, are we getting out for school, for snow? Are we, during this time, the COVID-19 crisis, are we going back to school at all? Are we not? What are the decisions being made? That's all coming from this local superintendent. And then he is over all the school principals within that district. So if there are, 5 schools in that district, he's over all of those. If there's only one school, then he's over that school. Or that principal at that school. So, for example, when I was working at New Albany is a city school district in and of itself. And there's one high school, there's one middle school, I think one elementary, might be 2 elementary schools. And the superintendent was over the principals at all those schools. For Union County, though, which is where New Albany is, the Union County School District has 5 high schools. There's Ingomar, Myrtle, East Union, West Union. Maybe that's all. Maybe it's only 4. I guess 4 county schools. And so that superintendent is over the principals and assistant principals at all 4 of those schools, from high school all the way down to elementary school. And so, depending on the size of the school district, the number of schools, that superintendent may have a ton of power, may not have very much power at all. If there's only one school, for example, well, then that superintendent doesn't have a whole lot more to say than the principal does. He's the top decision maker, but the principal is going to have a lot of say there too. Now, sometimes, or in the past, I don't think it's this way now, but in the past, the superintendents have been, they could get their position one of 2 ways. They could either be appointed by the school board, or because each school district has a local school board, okay? And so that board can hire or fire the superintendent. And so that superintendent could be elected, or they could be appointed. Now, you may say, well, which is better? Is there a difference? Whatever. In Itawamba County, for years, the superintendent was elected. And for a long time, the superintendent did a great job. It still does do a great job. But the problem with the elected official is that it's very easy to get influenced by outside forces. A parent who maybe has been a big supporter wants something. You try to accommodate that parent because you know that you need their money during the campaign, or you need their vote, or whatever. Maybe they're influential and would have influence on who would vote for you. So you get that kind of issue that works in with the political side. And again, that's not always a bad thing to have an elected official, but it is sometimes a bad thing from the standpoint of, does it end up being a popularity contest and you get somebody that doesn't really know much about education in that position? That's where the problem really can come in. Most school districts, and it may be a state law now over the last few years, where superintendents are appointed. And this is a better situation overall, because if the superintendent is appointed, then they are chosen by the school board to, okay, we want you to be the one that runs this school district. We want you to be the one that's in charge, basically the CEO of our school district. And so they don't have to worry about answering to, voters and making sure people are happy during the campaign season and all that. They're appointed, so they're not getting booted out every 3 or 4 years. Okay, and so there is a lot of value, at least in my opinion, of having that superintendent that is appointed instead of elected. Not to say that if they're elected they're bad, because that is not the case. In Itawamba County, I've known every superintendent that's been there for the last probably 30 years, and they've all been really, really good. Some of those were elected, some have been appointed. So just because they're elected doesn't mean they don't do a good job. It could potentially mean that there are issues. Okay, so just be aware of that. And then you get down to the local school principals. Of course, we know what that is. That's going to be your principals and assistant principals. And then you have the teacher, and then you have the student. And so when we talk about decisions being made in education, there's this long hierarchy of people that have to approve things from a state level before things can get filtered down. Now, the local school board and local superintendent in that local school district has autonomy as far as making decisions for their district, as long as they don't violate things from the Department of Education or from the state superintendent. Okay, so there is some freedom to do what they want to do within their district, but it's not always going to be this just kind of free for all where there's nobody in charge past the school district. There is this big, huge hierarchy. Now, that brings us to some influences that we have in education. Oh, I went too far. There we go. So you have several different people that are pulling at educators, pulling at school districts, pulling at even at the state level, local, state superintendents and that kind of thing. And one of the first types of influences that we have are professional education organizations. This is going to be your NEA, which is the National Educators Association. AFT is one that's mentioned here. That one I'm not really familiar with. It names it in the book. I think it's American Federation of Teachers, I think. That may be wrong, so don't quote me on that. But it is in your book. You could look back through and find that in Chapter 11. But NEA is one of the most common ones. There's also a Mississippi organization. I don't remember the exact acronym for it. Maybe MEA, maybe Mississippi Educators Association. I don't remember exactly. I joined the Mississippi group, I think for a year when I first was hired and started teaching, and then I didn't join after that. It's $50 a year, $100 a year, something like that. I mean, it's not super expensive, but it's not cheap either. I mean, it's not free, and so you do have to pay a due, a yearly fee to be able to be part of this group. And essentially, what this group does is go to bat for educators, whether that is trying to get better pay or supporting teachers if they've been terminated for what seems to be a wrongful termination situation. And they're just kind of there, sort of like a union. Unions are not good. Mississippi, we do not have unions. In other states, they do. A teachers' union is a really bad thing. Okay? That's not listed on here as something influencing public education, but they do. If you are in a state, I think Tennessee has a teachers' union. I don't know if Alabama does or not. But if you were to join a teachers' union, if the teachers' union says, well, we deserve more pay, we deserve this or that, or whatever their demand is, and the school or the state says, nope, we're not giving you that, then that teachers union could say, okay, everybody that's part of our union, we're going on strike. And if you don't go on strike, that's a bad thing, because as part of that union, you do what they say. So So, well, I can't afford to not work. I got to go to work. I got to get paid. And so you don't follow the union. Well, now all of a sudden you've caused problems within that union, and it's just a really touchy situation. I recommend staying out of teachers' unions if at all possible. Other influences on public education are parents. Unfortunately, parents are always going to have a part in education. And I say unfortunately because it can be a very bad thing to have parents so involved. Now, that being said, it can also be a very good thing. Okay? So, PTAs and PTOs, parent teacher associations or parent teacher organizations, those can be really good things. If they're very involved and they're raising money for different things for the school, all of that is awesome. I mean, there's great things that happen there. Where parents become a bad influence is when the parent tries to go to the principal and tries to influence what's done at the school because of who they are, because of maybe connections they have or people they know. That can be a bad thing. Because if a principal decides, well, hey, I need to keep this parent happy because they're influential in this community and they can help me later on, well, hey, the principal may make some decisions that aren't good, that don't help you as a teacher, don't help the students, all because they're trying to keep parents happy. And so, parents being involved can be a problem, but it can also be a really good thing. Our book takes the spin of having parents involved is good because of the PTA and PTOs, but it could be a bad thing too when they get too involved. Again, the way I sort of look at parents being involved, because as a teacher, here's how you're going to deal with parents more than anything else. You're going to have parents that are going to want to contact you about how their student is or how their kid is doing in class, and that's fine. They have every right to know how their kid is doing in class. The problem is if you say, well, the kid is not doing well, they're not doing this or that, or they've been a disruption or whatever. Most of the time, parents will be on your side and say, okay, I'll take care of it. But every now and then you have the parent that says, well, my child does nothing wrong. And they have this false sense of what their child is like. And when you say, well, little Johnny has been a disruption every day in class and won't be quiet and just talks and is disrespectful and all these things, well, little Johnny's mama may say, well, not my little Johnny. He would never do that. He's never like that. You must be doing something, And so they turn it back on the teacher as it's the teacher's fault instead of taking responsibility for their own kid. Now, I've seen fewer of those situations than I have of the other where the parent says, I'll handle it, or I'll do this, or I'll take care of that, or whatever. And that's where parents really can be helpful to you as a teacher. Because you're going to deal with that. You're going to have parents that want to know, how's my kid doing, whatever. A lot of times if they're wanting to know how their kid's doing, their kid's probably doing fine. The ones that don't ask and don't really care, they're the ones who have kids that aren't doing well. And so just kind of be aware of that. I've told this story before, but my wife had a kid when she was at Pontoc that just thought he didn't have to do anything. He wasn't going to do anything. And my wife told him to get to work or do whatever, and he said, nope. And she kind of looked at him like, excuse me? And he said, I don't want to. And she said, do I need to call your mama? And he goes, I don't care. And I don't know if he knew or just didn't really care, but my wife had the mama's cell phone number. Calls mama in the middle of class and says, I need you to come up here. So-and-so said he wasn't going to do his work and he's just refusing to do anything in my class. Mama says, I'll be there in 5 minutes. Mama comes to the school. Mama comes to the classroom. Mama yanks that kid out of class, goes down to the principal's office and says, get out, I need your office, and leave your paddle. And this mama tore this kid up. And when that kid left that office, he was a whole new kid because the parent got involved. And that's the good part. That's what you want parents to do. Again, sometimes they don't. Sometimes they don't do that. But hopefully they're going to be, maybe not to that extreme, but they're going to be very involved in their kids' behavior and with what they're doing in school, and they're going to know, hopefully, what their kid is doing. I'll give you one other example, and then I'll move on from parents. When I was in school, I was in the 5th grade, I think, and I can be a smart aleck at times, and I try not to be around students, but when I was in about the 5th grade, I decided I was just going to be a smart aleck. And I don't know why I decided this. Maybe my friends were this way. I don't remember. But my parents came to a parent-teacher conference. And you know how they go to an open house thing where they go to every teacher. And the first teacher said, oh, he's a great student. Just love him to death. You know, does really well, whatever. Go to the next teacher, same thing. Go to the next teacher, expecting to hear the same thing. And they go, he's got a smart mouth. And my dad just kind of cocked his head to the side and said, do what? And the teacher said, he's got a smart mouth. He's always smart alecky, talks back, whatever. And my dad looked at her and said, he wants tomorrow. And so I remember him coming home and getting in such big trouble because of the way I'd been acting at school. And I was a completely different person after that. Just, it's like a switch was flipped because my parents got involved. And so, as you deal with parents, a lot of them are going to be like that. And that's a great thing. Some of them are not. And so you just have to be realistic with dealing with parents. At the college level, I like the fact that I don't have to talk to your parents. If your parent were to call me and say, hey, how is so-and-so doing in my class? I say, I'm sorry, I can't talk to you legally about your kid and their grade. You need to ask them. Because you're an adult and I can't talk to your parents legally about your school. Okay? So, again, parents can be good, they can be bad, kind of a mixture of both. Other influences on public education. Businesses can have a major influence, from sponsorships to making changes, reform. They also, though, can put pressure on schools from a purchasing standpoint. So they provide money to schools. Schools are able to go buy things, buy computers, buy whatever technology they might need. But instead of just giving the money and say, hey, we support you, sometimes those businesses want to have influence and want to say, well, look, we paid for this. Here's something we need you to start teaching. Or here's a program we want you to implement. And so the businesses sometimes can get involved, and that's sometimes good and bad. And then the other influence on public education is the federal government. And this is going to be from the standpoint of the Department of Education overall, making decisions, and then also courts. So we talked about that in the previous slide, where the courts make laws. Those laws then impact education. For example, in Chapter 10, we talked about Brown versus Board of Education. That said that separate but equal schools for African Americans was not legal. And so that forced schools to desegregate. And so that has a major impact, obviously, on education. And so the federal courts can have a lot of input, especially as cases go to the Supreme Court and decisions are made. There continue to be influences there. Now, we talked about spending a minute ago. Let me show you this. I find this quite interesting. In the United States, and I believe this is federal spending, okay? The United States spends 3.7% of its gross domestic product on public education from the elementary and secondary levels. So, like, community colleges don't get counted here. Universities don't get counted here. And so, the U.S. is spending 3.7% on education. Now, you can see the list of countries that spend more, the ones that spend less. The ones that spend more, Iceland, Denmark, United Kingdom, Belgium, and Sweden, are not spending tons more, but they are spending some more. And then you've got countries that spend less: the Czech Republic, Japan, Spain, Slovak Republic. Um, all of those are spending a good bit less than the United States, um, almost 0.7% or more for each of those, 0.8% for each of those. And so um, that is a good bit of spending less than the United States. Now, does that mean anything significant? Maybe, maybe not. Um, it may mean that the United States is spending about the right amount. Japan is really the one country where you might say, well, they have a better education system than we do. Um, I don't know that the others necessarily have any better or worse, but Japan, because they have such high level students, at times we think, oh, well, what they're doing is really working. The problem is they don't provide public education for everybody. And so, if a kid is struggling in school, well, they may say, all right, you need to go learn how to do this trade and you're going to be a trade worker. Versus somebody who is, really intelligent, maybe with technology, they say, all right, you're going to be a tech guru. And so they kind of push them in that direction. And so Japan doesn't necessarily even give us an accurate representation of how much money should be spent or could be spent. To me, it seems like this is a fairly low percentage. But when you think about all the other things that our government is spending money on, there's a lot of things that could be cut, in my opinion. Again, strictly my opinion. And you could put more money into education because, as you know, especially in Mississippi, and let's kind of boil it back down to Mississippi for a minute. Teacher pay in Mississippi is lowest, one of the lowest in the country. We do not get paid all that great. Starting salary is not bad, but there's really no room to grow from there. Retirement system is really good, but it's just not a very high paying career, which then forces a lot of people into other careers that could be really good teachers. And so, the fact that you want to be a teacher is a great thing because I've met you. I know most of you, I feel like, and you're smart people and can do a lot of good things. And so the fact that you want to be in education is encouraging. So with that in mind, this is a topic that could be debated in Mississippi. I don't know the exact percentage, but I know that MDE, so Department of Education, gets more money than the community colleges. They get more money than the universities. So just to kind of make sure you're aware, in Mississippi, you have MDE, that's K through 12. You have the IHL, Institute of Higher Learning, that governs the 8 public universities in Mississippi. And then you have MCCB, it's the Mississippi Community College Board, that kind of goes to bat for community colleges. And so you have these 3 different entities that are all trying to get money for education, and our state government doesn't do a great job of saying, all right, we're going to give out this much money across the board. They say, all right, we got to really take care of K-12, and so they pour more money into that, which is good for you as a teacher. Then they pour more money into the IHL, even though there's just as many students being served in the community colleges. And then there's 15 community colleges in Mississippi, and they're locally run by local boards, and it's one of the best systems in the country, but yet we only get a very small percentage of the overall budget. And so spending in Mississippi on education is not to where it should be, in my opinion, and I think it could be better. And I think we will see that begin to be a trend moving forward over the next few years. We'll stop this video here. We'll finish up the chapter in the next video. If you have any questions about any